All right, in this particular project, we're going to deal with making some more complicated methods. Methods using input, methods using loops, a method that calls a method, that sort of thing. So you can kind of see some better examples of some more complicated methods. The ones we've made so far have been fairly simple. Now, keep in mind that in a major program, a lot of the time, the main will only have a couple of lines of code. Almost everything that we do will be moved up into methods. So it's not unusual for a fairly advanced program to just have like one line of code or a handful of lines of code down here in the main, and that's it. And up here, you'll have a bunch of different methods with all kinds of code and stuff running in them. Let's say, for example, void menu. Let's say I just have a method that displays a menu system for me. And all this is going to do is just simply print a menu on the screen. Choose an option. 1. Chicken sandwich. 2. Turkey sandwich. 3. BLT. We'll just keep it with some sandwiches. We'll make it simple. So all this is going to do is just simply display this menu. Choose an option. Ta-da! Very nice and easy, right? Now if I call this method down here, menu, well, it helps if I spell it right. There we go. I run it, and it also helps if I hit the right button. There we go. It displays my menu for me with one line, right? Now let's say I wanted to use this and user input, for example. There's the menu. I want them to type in an input, and then, I do a couple of things with that. Maybe I would make another method here, just for the user input. Of course, I'd need to import my user input first. We'll do the shortcut way for that. So, public static and void, well, I'll just call it we'll just call it choice. And for this, I'm actually going to do the inputs and stuff inside here. So scanner input equals new scanner system dot in. Now, I didn't do the import at the top, so it's going to give me this red line. But if I click here, it can auto add it to the very top for me, which is very useful if you want to be a little lazy. So I've declared my scanner. Now, the difficulty here is if I declare the scanner inside this method, it can only be used inside this method. If I want to be able to use it without having to declare it every single time, I may want to put it up here, and it would have to be a public static, and make it a global variable, basically. But of course, personally, I don't really care where it goes. You can declare it in here if you're only going to use it once. If you were going to use it for every single method, this would probably be the better place to put it. It really depends on you. You'll have an extra line or two every, like if I had 10 methods and I was putting this in every method, I have an extra 10 lines of code. So that's a good and easy way to save yourself some hassle. So in choice, and all this is going to do is, I make a choice. So 1, 2, 3, int choice equals input dot next int. And if I wanted it to be a string, I could do that. If I wanted to avoid the crashes, I could make it string choice equals input dot next line, and then I could just use 1. So either one of those really works if you want to try adjusting it for one or the other just for practice. It's not too bad of a thing to try. But I can do an if, or I can do a switch case. If choice dot equals 1. And I just print up a little message. You get a chicken sandwich. else if choice dot equals 2. And I can't use just the 2 as a number because it's going to be a string, not a number. So 2. And I get a turkey sandwich. There we go. And else if choice, and if you're using strings, you have to use the dot equals 3. And I can say you get a BLT. And else, since you can't choose properly, you get, what's a good, a not so good sandwich here? A green cheese sandwich. Nothing worse than a green cheese sandwich. And if. Now, if you wanted to do this as a switch case, it kind of defaults to telling you, hey, why don't you make a switch case out of this? You can click up here and convert it, or you can just write it as a switch case. Ifs are just fine. Now, I will say, again, as I usually do, switch cases are more efficient. The way an if works is it's going to say, well, if choice equals 1, it's not 1, okay. Is choice 2, it's not 2. Is it 3? It's not 3. And then it will go to the else. It'll go to each individual one until it finds the correct answer. If I convert this to a switch case, and you don't have to do this, but it will specifically, if I type in 3, go to 3. It'll skip the 1, 2, just go directly to that one. So if you had hundreds or thousands of choices in a project or program or something to go through, if you're reading text files or databases or something, it would be easier and more efficient to use a switch case. Or if you're doing like the same set of ifs every single second, for example, let's say you're taking user input. They they hit up, down, or left or right. Up, down, left, right, BA, select, start. So you're checking for input and you're doing that constantly. That would probably be better as a switch case than an if. Because I wouldn't want to say, if up is pressed, if this is pressed, if this is pressed, if this is pressed, and then just keep going through those ifs. Just a switch case. Boom. You press up, it goes directly to up. It doesn't have to check down, left, right, and all the others. And that's usually what you see in cases like that. But you're welcome to use whichever one you want for this. It doesn't really matter. If you want to keep it as an if, that's fine. I'm just swap mine so you can kind of see the difference. Now, here's the thing. I could put my choice here. Choice. And this will work just fine. I'll run it. I choose 3. You get a BLT sandwich, right? Probably it's better if I just get rid of that and I put it at the end of this. Choice. Because then my main only has one line of code. Menu. The menu runs, and then it runs to the choice, and it runs that. So we take a little look. I'll have a turkey sandwich. And it tells me I get a turkey sandwich. So basically what happens here is it runs this code, gets the choice, runs choice, does that thing, and then it backs up. And if there's anything after this, program ends. Let's say I choose chicken sandwich. You get a chicken sandwich. Program ends. So what ends up happening is it runs this, gets the choice. Choice is here. So it runs choice. And I got a chicken sandwich. Once I've finished, it's going to come back up to here because I just finished running that statement. And then we will display program ends. And if I had something else here, it would display that next. Program really ends. Now, turkey sandwich. So it starts off in the main, and we jump to this method up here, run it, and that takes us to this one here. And this is actually not so dissimilar from how most programs work. Especially if you have a fairly sizable program, there'll probably be a bunch of different methods. A method that calls another method. Sometimes methods can call themselves if you're using recursion or something, which we'll talk about later. But this is an example of what you would kind of see. We got some user input here, we got some menu systems, and a method that calls other methods. Let's see, one more example should probably be okay, and then I think that'll be good enough. We want something a little more complex. Let's say I wanted to do some loops or anything like that. Just to display something, right? There's several ways I could approach this. Let's say I come here and I say public static void eat. Let's say it's time to eat. All this is going to do is just print that when I run it, right? So if I were to put it here at the menu, it would print that one time, right? One, it's time to eat. The program really ends now. You kind of see where that works. Now, if I were to move this up into one of these places, let's say after choice. Let's say I just come up here and I just say cut paste. So what do you think is going to happen now? We display our menu, we go to choice. We choose our chicken sandwich. It finishes, it's going to go to this, where it's going to run this line. That's going to finish, and then it's going to print my other items, right? So I choose something, it runs that. Now let's say I wanted this, it's time to eat, to run multiple times. Let's say I wanted to display 5 times. I could use a loop. For example, right here, for int I equals 0, and I can run this method 5 times. So with a single line, I can run thousands of lines of code multiple times. Since I don't have a lot of room or a lot of stuff in this eat method, though, I could just put the loop in here. So for int I equals 0, I less than, say, 5, I plus plus. I put my little braces. Now, technically, I'm going to tell you, you don't have to put the braces for a single line like this. It'll still run. But if you don't put the braces, it's kind of ambiguous as to where it starts and where it ends. So it is honestly better programming practice to put braces down. Because then I can say, ta-da, end 4. And that ends the for loop. That tells me specifically this is where that ends. And if I have multiple lines of code, then I can see that it's all contained in this box. If I don't have this, then I could end up spacing something incorrectly and it only runs like a couple of lines. It doesn't run the others. Sometimes it just is difficult to read. This is fairly straightforward. I can see that that line's inside there. So I run, I choose my item, and it runs this method with this loop inside, just like that. And of course, I could put the eat down inside this one too, and it would basically equate to the same thing. I could move that guy after the switch, and you'll end up with the same exact outcome. Because this finishes, and then it would run it up here, or this finishes, it runs it here. So now I have this method that gets called. It calls choice before it finishes, and this calls eat before it finishes. And you can just nest these until you run out of memory, technically. And once they finish, we'll come back up to each one of these until we finish. And then the program's done. And hopefully that gave you a little more insight in some things you can do with methods. As you can see, it's quite useful in most of these programs, and you can also hide these when you're done. For example, if you're done with that method and you know it works, you can minimize it so you don't have to see all the code. And of course, you can make it bigger too. Doot, doot, depending on how you want it to look. So as you can see, my main really only has like a line of code, and that's pretty normal for later programming classes. You just have 1 or 2 lines here. Maybe declare some variables, global at the top, or declare them locally depending on what you need. Well, if you have any questions or anything like that, leave some messages below or come see me personally. Otherwise, I will see you next time.